Two people, same salary. 10 years later, one has $400,000, the other has $12,000 and a car payment. Same income, same city, same index fund advice. The gap has nothing to do with what they earned. It's about something operating underneath every financial decision they made, invisibly for a decade. Most people are trying to fix a wealth problem at the surface. Budgets, strategies, savings rates, while the real gap runs deeper. It's not discipline, it's not luck, it's financial identity. In the next few minutes, I'll show you exactly how to identify which financial identity you're e-running and the 3 steps to change it. Most people think wealth building works like this. You learn what to do, then you do it. You read about investing, so you invest. You hear about budgeting, so you budget. Knowledge leads to action, action leads to results. But that's not how it actually works. Between knowledge and action, there's a filter. That filter is identity. Every financial decision you face passes through an unconscious question. Is this something someone like me does? Not someone you aspire to be. Someone you believe you are right now, today, at the identity level? Here's the framework. There are 3 levels to how people relate to money. The first level is outcomes. This is what you say you want. More savings, less debt, financial freedom, whatever the goal is. Most people operate here. They focus on outcomes, set goals around outcomes, feel bad when outcomes don't happen. The second level is actions. This is what you do. Budgeting, investing, earning, spending. When outcomes don't match expectations, people try to change actions. They try a new budget app, a different investment strategy, another savings challenge. But there's a third level, and it's the one that actually runs everything. Identity. This is who you believe you are. And identity doesn't just influence actions. Identity determines which actions feel natural, which ones feel like pretending, and which ones you'll never sustain no matter how motivated you are in the moment. When your actions conflict with your identity, identity wins every single time. You can force yourself to budget for a few weeks, maybe even a few months. But if budgeting conflicts with your underlying identity, with the story OF, who you are, you'll stop. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack discipline, because human beings are wired to behave in alignment with their identity. We protect it, we reinforce it, we return to it, especially under stress. This is why someone can read 50 books on wealth building and still be broke. The books gave them new actions, but the actions never integrated into identity, so the actions felt like a costume, something they were trying on, and eventually they took the costume off and went back to what felt real. The wealth gap nobody talks about is this. Some people have a financial identity that naturally generates wealth-building behaviors. Others have a financial identity that naturally generates wealth-preventing behaviors. And the cruel part, the part that makes this so insidious, is that both groups can have the same knowledge, the same income, even the same goals. But one group is swimming downstream with their identity, and the other is fighting upstream against it. Guess which one wins over a decade? Let's go deeper into how this actually operates. Your financial identity was built over years, mostly before you were old enough to question it. If you grew up watching money cause stress, identity lesson learned, money is stressful. If you grew up watching your parents spend everything they earned, identity lesson learned, that's what you do when you have money. If you grew up in an environment where talking about wealth was considered greedy or unseemly, identity lesson learned, people like us don't focus on getting rich. These aren't conscious beliefs. They're deeper. They're embedded into your sense of normal. Here's how it shows up in real life. Someone with a wealthy identity doesn't feel like they're sacrificing when they invest. It feels normal, even obvious. Someone with a scarcity identity feels anxious when they invest because it feels like they're losing access to money they might need. Same action, completely different internal experience, and that internal experience determines whether the action continues. Someone with a high-earning identity doesn't feel awkward negotiating salary. Someone without it feels like they're being difficult or asking for too much, even when the number is market rate. The action isn't hard. The identity conflict is hard. Your financial identity controls your baseline, the state you unconsciously return to. If your identity says you're someone who lives paycheck to paycheck, then even when you get a raise, you'll adjust spending until you're back at paycheck to paycheck. Not because you're bad with money, because you're maintaining identity equilibrium. If your identity says you're not the kind of person who has 6 months of expenses saved, then every time you start building that fund, something will come up. An emergency, a justification, a reason to drain it, and it'll feel justified in the moment because identity is protecting itself. You can't hold an outcome that contradicts your identity for long. The tension is unbearable. Something has to give, and it's almost never identity. This is why most financial advice doesn't work for most people. The advice is fine. The strategies are sound. But they're designed for people who already have a compatible identity. Tell someone to max out their retirement account, and if their identity is, I'm someone building long-term wealth, they'll do it. If their identity is, I'm someone who enjoys life now because the future is uncertain, they won't. Not because they don't understand compound interest, because the action feels wrong at the identity level, and identity always feels like truth. Here's where it gets even more complex. Financial identity isn't just about wealth or poverty. It's about dozens of smaller identity components that all feed into how you handle money. There's consumption identity. Are you someone who buys things or someone who delays gratification? There's risk identity. Are you someone who takes calculated risks or someone who plays it safe? There's visibility identity. Are you someone who displays wealth or someone who hides it? There's work identity. Are you someone who earns through time or someone who builds assets? Every single one of these operates under the surface, shaping decisions you think are rational but are actually identity-driven. And here's the part that makes this gap so persistent. Most people never examine their financial identity. They're not even aware it exists. They think they're making individual choices based on circumstances, but they're actually running a program that was installed years ago. So they keep trying to change outcomes by changing actions, and it doesn't stick, and they blame themselves for lacking willpower or discipline, when the real issue is they're trying to execute a financial strategy that's incompatible with their financial identity. It's like trying to run Windows software on a Mac operating system. The problem isn't the software, it's the underlying system. Let me show you what this looks like in everyday moments, the small decisions where identity is actually running the show. Someone gets a bonus at work, $1,500, unexpected. Person A immediately thinks about where to invest it. Person B immediately thinks about what to buy. Neither of them deliberates much. It's automatic. That's identity. The bonus didn't create the decision. Identity processed the bonus and produced the decision that aligns with who each person believes they are. Someone is out with friends. The group wants to go to an expensive restaurant. Person A says they're trying to save money and suggests an alternative. Person B goes along because saying no feels cheap, feels like it exposes them as someone who can't afford it, and that conflicts with their identity. Person B spends $60 they didn't plan to spend, not because they wanted the food that badly, because protecting their social identity felt more urgent than protecting their financial future. Someone is scrolling online and sees a course on sale. Learn to invest in real estate, normally $900, today only $200. Person A thinks, I'm not a real estate person, that's not my thing, and scrolls past. Person B thinks the same thing, but buys it anyway because they have an identity of being someone who invests in self-improvement, even though they have 4 other courses they never finished. Neither decision was about real estate. Both were about identity. Someone gets a raise, $300 more per month. Person A immediately adjusts their automatic transfer to savings. The raise never touches their checking account in a discretionary way. Person B absorbs the raise into lifestyle. Slightly better groceries, an extra subscription, a higher rent budget when they move next. Within 2 months, the $300 is gone, and they don't even know where it went. Same raise, different identity, different automatic response. Someone is considering a job change. New job pays the same, but has better long-term growth potential. Person A takes it because they have an identity oriented toward future building. Person B stays because they have an identity oriented toward stability and the known. Neither choice is wrong, but over 10 years they lead to completely different financial trajectories, and both people think they're just making the obvious choice based on circumstances. So how do you actually work with this? How do you identify your financial identity and change it if it's not serving you? There are some principles that make this clearer. Principle 1, your financial identity is revealed by your automatic behaviors, not your stated goals. If you want to know your real financial identity, don't listen to what you say you value. Watch what you do when you're not forcing yourself to do anything. What do you do with unexpected money? What do you do when you're stressed? What do you do when no one's watching? That's your identity talking. Most people have a massive gap between their aspirational identity and their actual identity, and they waste years trying to achieve goals that their actual identity will never support. Principle 2, you can't shame yourself into a new identity. I see this constantly. Someone realizes their money behaviors aren't working, so they beat themselves up, call themselves stupid or lazy or bad with money, hoping that shame will motivate change. It doesn't. Shame reinforces the negative identity. If you tell yourself you're bad with money, you're literally strengthening the identity of someone who is bad with money, which makes it even harder to behave like someone who's good with money. Identity change requires a different approach. You have to start proving to yourself, through small actions, that you're becoming someone different. Evidence builds identity. Shame destroys it. Principle 3, identity follows consistency, not intensity. You don't build a new financial identity by making one huge change. You build it by making small, identity-consistent choices repeatedly until your brain starts to believe that's who you are. If you want to become someone who invests, start investing $20 a week. The amount doesn't matter. The repetition does. Every time you do it, you're casting a vote for the identity of someone who invests. Do it enough times, and your brain updates the identity. Then larger investing decisions feel natural instead of foreign. But if you try to go from zero to maxing out retirement accounts overnight, it feels like pretending, and you won't sustain it. Principle 4. Your financial identity is reinforced by your environment and social circle. If everyone around you spends everything they earn, it is incredibly difficult to maintain an identity as someone who builds wealth. Not impossible, but difficult, because you're constantly swimming against social proof. Human beings are social creatures. We adopt the behaviors and norms of our groups. If your group's financial identity is consumption and living for today, that will pull at you constantly. This doesn't mean you need to abandon your friends, but it does mean you need to be intentional about adding inputs that reinforce the identity you want. Podcasts, communities, even just people you follow online who model the financial identity you're building toward. Principle 5. Financial identity is often tied to other identities in ways you don't realize. Someone might have an identity as a generous person, which is beautiful, except it bleeds into financial self-sabotage because they can't say no when people ask for money. Someone might have an identity as a free spirit, which is wonderful, except it makes budgeting feel like oppression. Someone might have an identity as a hard worker, which is admirable, except it prevents them from building passive income because passive income feels like cheating. You have to untangle these. You have to figure out which identities are in conflict and find a way to integrate them. You can be generous and have boundaries. You can be free-spirited and have a plan. You can be a hard worker and build systems. But first, you have to see the conflict. Principle 6. Your relationship with money is often a mirror of deeper identity wounds. If you feel like you don't deserve wealth, that's not a money problem. If you sabotage yourself every time you start to get ahead, that's not a discipline problem. If you feel guilty having more than others, that's not a generosity problem. These are identity issues that show up in financial behaviors, and you can budget and invest and optimize all you want, but until you address the underlying identity wound, the behavior will keep looping back. This is the part most finance content ignores because it's uncomfortable and messy, but it's also the part that actually determines outcomes for a lot of people. Principle 7. Changing financial identity requires changing the story you tell about yourself. Right now, you have a story. Maybe it's, I'm bad with money. Maybe it's, I'll never be wealthy. Maybe it's, money always slips through my fingers. These stories feel like observations, like you're just describing reality. But they're not. They're identities, disguised as facts. And every time you repeat the story, you strengthen it. If you want a different financial reality, you need a different story. Not a fake affirmation you don't believe. A story based on evidence you're building. I'm someone who's learning to manage money better. I'm in the process of building wealth. I'm someone who makes intentional financial decisions. The story shifts, the identity shifts, the behaviors follow. Principle 8. The highest level of financial identity is seeing yourself as someone who solves problems, not someone who avoids them. Wealthy people, genuinely wealthy people, tend to have an identity that includes problem solving and agency. When something goes wrong financially, they don't collapse into helplessness. They figure it out. Poor financial identity often includes learned helplessness, a belief that financial problems happen to you and you just have to endure them. This is one of the deepest gaps. It's not about intelligence. It's about whether you see yourself as an agent who acts on the world or a victim who the world acts upon. And that identity, more than almost anything else, determines financial trajectory over a lifetime. Let's put some numbers to this so you can see the actual cost of misaligned financial identity. Take two people, both earning $70,000 a year. Person A has a financial identity that includes being someone who invests 10% of income. It's not a struggle. It's just who they are. That's $7,000 a year. Over 30 years, assuming a 7% average return, that's about $700,000. Person A didn't do anything heroic. They just had an identity that made that behavior automatic. Person B has the same income, but a financial identity that says investing is for later, for when things are more stable, for when they earn more. They spend what they earn. Maybe they're not reckless. Maybe they even save a little here and there, but nothing consistent, nothing systematic. Over 30 years, they end up with maybe 30 or 40,000, mostly from forced savings like a small 401k match they didn't opt out of. The gap between these two people isn't income. It's not even financial literacy. Person B probably knows they should invest. The gap is identity. One person's identity made wealth building automatic. The other person's identity made wealth building feel optional, something to get to eventually, and eventually never came. Or look at it from the spending side. Someone with a consumption identity, someone who unconsciously believes that money is for spending and that's what makes life good, might spend an extra $200 a month on things that don't actually improve their life much. Subscriptions they don't use, convenience purchases, lifestyle inflation that feels normal. $200 a month is $2,400 a year. Doesn't sound devastating, but over a decade, that's $4,000. And that's just the nominal amount, not accounting for what that money could have become if it had been invested. The opportunity cost of an identity mismatch isn't just what you spend, it's what you never build. Here's what this looks like in two lives, same starting point, different identity layer. Both people are 25, both earn $55,000, both have student debt, both live in the same city. Person A has a financial identity built around future optimization. They're not extreme, they're not depriving themselves, but when decisions come up, their automatic filter is, does this move me toward financial security or away from it? They rent a place that's good enough, not the nicest they could afford. They buy a used car that's reliable, not new. They automate savings and investing before they pay for anything discretionary. When they get raises, they increase their savings proportionally. None of this feels like a sacrifice to them because it aligns with identity. They're not resisting who they are, they're expressing it. Person B has a financial identity built around present comfort and social belonging. They're not reckless, they're not stupid, but when decisions come up, their automatic filter is, does this make my life feel good now, and does this fit with what people around me are doing? They rent a nicer place because it feels worth it. They buy a newer car because the old ones feel like a hassle. They spend on experiences and social activities because that's what their friends do, and opting out feels isolating. When they get raises, their lifestyle adjusts upward. None of this feels irresponsible to them because it aligns with their identity. They're just living normally. 10 years pass. Person A has $200,000 in assets. Not because they were extreme, because their identity made small wealth-building behaviors automatic, and small behaviors compound. Person B has $18,000 and a car loan. Not because they were reckless, because their identity made small wealth-preventing behaviors automatic, and those compound too, just in the other direction. Both people lived according to their identity. Both people felt like they were doing the reasonable thing. The gap is the result of two different operating systems running for a decade. So let's project this forward for you right now with the financial identity you currently have. If nothing changes, if you keep operating on the same identity layer you're running today, where will you be in 10 years? Not where you hope to be. Where the pattern you're currently living will actually take you. If your identity right now is someone who spends what they earn, you'll spend what you earn for the next 10 years and a decade will pass, and you'll wonder where it went. If your identity right now is someone who avoids looking at their finances because it's stressful, you'll keep avoiding it, and the stress will compound. And 10 years from now, the gap between where you are and where you need to be will be even wider. But here's the other future, the one where you recognize that financial identity is the operating system and you can change it. No tea overnight, not through willpower or motivation, through small, consistent identity-building actions. You start investing $20 a week, not because $20 will make you rich, but because you're becoming someone who invests. You start making one intentional spending decision a day, not to deprive yourself, but to build the identity of someone who thinks before they spend. You change the story you tell about yourself from I'm bad with money to I'm learning to build wealth. And you do this for months, then years. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, your identity shifts. The things that used to feel hard start to feel normal. The things that used to feel impossible start to feel obvious. 10 years in that future, you're not just wealthier. You're someone different. You're operating on a different system. And that system produces different results automatically, without force, without constant effort. That's the future that's available, not through hacks or shortcuts or secrets. Through identity change, which is the slowest, hardest, most uncomfortable work, and also the only work that actually lasts. The wealth gap nobody talks about isn't income. It's not education. It's not even opportunity, though that matters. The gap is identity. It's the difference between people who see themselves as wealth builders and people who don't. And that identity runs under every decision, every moment, every dollar, shaping a life in ways that are invisible until you look back and see the distance between two paths that started in the same place. You can't budget your way out of an identity problem. You can't invest your way out of it. You can't earn your way out of it. The only way out is through. You have to see the identity you're running, acknowledge where it came from and what it's costing you, and then slowly, piece by piece, build a new one. Not by pretending, by proving. Small actions repeated until they become automatic, until they become who you are. That's the work, that's the gap. And closing it changes everything.